welcome to DHL for SMEs. Today we're talking about the foundation for navigating Qatar's business landscape. And I've got two amazing guests with me today. I'm privileged to have you two guys with me. Obviously, Felix has been my business partner for quite a few years now. And now we've got somebody that I always look up to with Tamimi, because from my 16 years of experience here in Qatar, I've always used you as a benchmark. I've always used you with the information so that it can guide me and also our clients. So thank you so much for being here today. So let's kick this off. The great thing that you're going to go over is the jurisdictions. And I think that's going to be one key point that we're going to cover today, so that people can realize that there are quite a few options out there and there's so many different advantages to some of those jurisdictions. So let's take it away.
Thank you. Excellent. I'll take the liberty of getting started with the sectors as mentioned by Ahmed. And what we try to offer today is a holistic view on what is possible here in Qatar. And we start by shedding light on some of the key sectors that are standing out for us and that are offering extensive opportunities and possibilities. I'm starting with agriculture because agriculture has witnessed transformational change over the last couple of years, coming from a place where Qatar was heavily reliant on imports from third countries. The level of local production has increased significantly. We have reached self-sufficiency in several sectors, including dairy, poultry, but also fruits and vegetables, right? Where the local production level has increased significantly because of the government support, but also investment from abroad, basically, and the participation of foreign investors. So this is one of the key sectors I'd like to highlight. Secondly, education and health, two positions that make up a large portion of the national budget on a regular basis, right? And also most recently in the budget for 2024. In education particularly, we've seen a transformational change with the development and the attraction of local education sector, but also the attraction of international top education institutions under Qatar Foundation's umbrella. In the health sector, I think it's worth highlighting the fact that Qatar ranks very high when it comes to the level of investment in the health sector, and we have seen the development of extensive infrastructure, but also the development of local talent with initiatives under Hamad Medical Corporations and more recently also in the private sector. Then obviously the energy industry, covering not only non-renewable energy, meaning oil, gas, petrochemicals, which are obviously prominently represented in Qatar and get a lot of attention with the North Field expansion, NFE and NFS projects basically, but then also the renewable sector, right, with solar power projects and several initiatives that are covering or falling under this area. Moving on to manufacturing, Qatar has been emerging as a manufacturing hub. Again, this is partly due to government-led policies and strategies and the involvement of key stakeholders like Qatar Development Bank, which is providing extensive funding opportunities to local but also foreign investors that that decide to set up in country and partner with local counterparts. Logistics, in a sense that Qatar has positioned itself as a hub for regional and international transportation by air, by sea, and by land, being home to a major airport, right, with Hamad International Airport that is consecutively being awarded and considered as one of the world's best airports, being home to a large and renowned national carrier with Qatar Airways, which is not only transporting passengers but also cargo. And on the other side, when it comes to sea transport, Hamad Port in the south of Qatar, a deep sea port, which has also contributed to Qatar being able to receive larger vessels, right? And this port being operated by Mawani and Q terminals, basically, and offering therefore a gateway to the world. Professional and financial services are obviously part of Qatar's backbone. There are a number of jurisdictions that are home to local but also international financial and professional service providers, and these sectors have significantly contributed to Qatar's national economy and will continue to do so. There's a lot of interesting initiatives which we are going to talk about in more detail. And it's then information technology and a number of other sectors, right, that we should not forget. But in the spirit of time, we're not going going to go into more detail. It's sports that is part of Qatar's national vision, basically, and we've seen the hosting of major sporting and non-sporting events over the last couple of years, and Qatar emerging as a major sports hub. Culture, travel and tourism, right? And construction, real estate, and related sectors. So there's all in all several sectors that can be considered for local businesses, but also foreign investors. They're offering extensive opportunities.
I'm looking at all those industries, and I'm thinking to myself, is there one chosen more than the other? But they're all growing. Every single one of those are growing. And the logistically, where Qatar is placed right now, and because of the ports and the airports, it's got to be one of the most opportunities that everybody should be grasping.
Qatar has developed a world-class infrastructure, right, for air and sea trade, basically, and is geographically positioned in the center between east and west, and can therefore function as a hub for international trade. And that's something we try to advocate. That's something we try to promote on an ongoing basis. And we also see the public sector doing the same with key stakeholders, including Invest Qatar, the investment promotion agency, the Qatar Free Zones Authority, right, which is right next to the airport and right next to the seaport, reaching out to the world and trying to position Qatar as a prominent alternative.
Every single one of those industries are growing. We're going to move now on to the strategies and policies. Ahmed.
This is again...
I'm going to take the liberty again. I'm sorry, I'm going to do a bit more talking.
Every time I listen to you, I learn something new every single time. So please, you carry on.
Sorry, Felix, I just want to add, we were speaking, me and Felix, outside, regarding the huge transformation we've seen in Qatar during the several decades. And so me personally, I came to Qatar 2004, and the changes we've seen is definitely huge. So from, again, education, I would maybe give some examples. The past few years, even this year, we've seen so many universities from Europe, from UK, even from Asia. There is one Malaysian university that has recently opened. So I think what Qatar is trying to do is working with different government bodies and also with the private sectors outside Qatar, plus including also with Qataris and the private sector. It's definitely has been a very good change in Qatar.
And I'm not going to take too much time, but I can remember when we first started, Felix, going back all those years ago with hydroponics. And in the very early days, it was just a dream that was being fulfilled, right? We all wanted to get part of this. We ourselves, we've done extensive work on this, but it was just phenomenal how things have changed now to this day, where it's playing a massive role.
I couldn't agree more with several initiatives being developed, right, in different parts of the country, whether it's on the mainland or in the free zones. You've got stakeholders that are investing heavily, basically, in advanced agricultural technology, right, to grow plants in an arid environment.
Yeah, it is. It's phenomenal. And I made a mistake. You're going to be covering strategies and policies. And this is really important, right? These are fundamental things that we need to consider.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all in line with what we've just discussed. We've seen these developments due to a wise and forward-thinking policy making, right, and strategy development and implementation. And I think it's from the outset probably worth mentioning Qatar National Vision, right? Qatar National Vision 2030, which is the umbrella strategy and policy developed on a government level and concerning all sectors and the society at large, particularly focusing on not only economic development, but also human and social development and environmental development, right? And the National Vision 2030 has been broken down into a national development strategy with several national development strategies. We're now on the last leg, leading or ranging from 2024 to 2030, NDS 3, which is particularly focusing on the asset utilization, right? Where in the past, Qatar has heavily invested in creating physical infrastructure. It is now about utilizing this infrastructure and becoming a knowledge-based economy, attracting talent from around the world, basically, and having them benefit from world-class infrastructure that was created over the last decades. And this then ties into various other sector-related strategies. There's a few that I'd like to highlight today just because they're standing out, including the national fintech strategy, for example, right, which is devised by Qatar Central Bank, including other stakeholders, including the Qatar Financial Center, National Bank, and various other commercial banks, Development Bank being part of it. And as part of this national strategy, basically, this fintech strategy, we have seen incubators and accelerators emerge. We have seen an ecosystem build and develop, right? And this is very promising, and it's extremely rewarding to see, having spent many years here in Qatar. But there are other important sector-related strategies, including the Qatar Freight Master Plan, right, covering the logistics aspect, which is an initiative led by the Ministry of Transport, and again, tying in all the stakeholders. So the development and implementation of these strategies also ensures ongoing communication between stakeholders. And we've been talking about it on regular occasions, right, where we find it extremely important for ongoing and streamlined communication between different stakeholders in order to ensuring the ease of doing business in general, right, for local and foreign businesses.
Let me interact there, because what I want to do is sometimes we can sometimes think that these areas, logistics for one, right, is oversaturated, but far from it. It's a massive area that's just going to keep on growing.
True. There's significant growth potential across sectors, but particularly also in logistics. I mean, with Qatar positioning itself as a hub for international trade. We've then got a national or artificial intelligence strategy. We've got a cybersecurity strategy that has been developed, right? There's a national food security strategy, which is one I'd like to highlight because it is a central element to Qatar's security, right? And was very important a result of the blockade a couple of years ago, right, which is a catalyst for change and has certainly accelerated the development of the agriculture sector, right? But there's also a national tourism strategy, for example, 2030, and we are familiar with the figures, right, where Qatar has managed to attract many more tourists from outside post-World Cup, right, and is positioning Qatar as a major destination for local people, for residents, for visitors, but also for regional tourists and international tourists, right? And then obviously the national environment and climate change strategy, a top topic on the agenda, right? Led by the Ministry of Municipality and Environment. And the sports strategy 2022 to 2030, which again is in line with Qatar hosting, and developing a sports ecosystem, right, for athletes, for trainers, for businesses basically from around the world. And last but not least, the digital government strategy, right? We have also witnessed over the years we have spent here in Qatar the digitization of many government processes, right? And we continue to see further improvement and advancement in this area, right? With the registration process, for example, when it comes to business, largely moving from manual to automated and online procedures under the Ministry of Commerce, but also with the Qatar Financial Center and most recently with the Qatar Free Zones Authority.
With all of this, Felix, and this is really important for everybody to be hearing this right now, is that they've got to do their research. Every one of those areas that you've just discussed now, if you're not doing this, this is just absolutely crucial for your business, knowing exactly what is out there and what the opportunities are.
I completely agree with you in a sense that it is worth looking at these documents, familiarizing yourself, right, and understanding the opportunities that lie within. So do have a look at it. These materials are going to be shared with you after the presentation, and look it up. The information is out there. It's just a matter of making the effort and familiarizing yourself with it, right?
Great, yeah. And I would hear, maybe you've mentioned the incubators, and I know how many different government or private universities in Qatar and colleges are doing their best to definitely to support initiatives related to incubators. So again, we're speaking here about SMEs, and students are definitely playing the main role when it comes to SMEs and being supported by the universities, by the government, and I think working together with banks, with different stakeholders is definitely a good thing. And we've seen so many initiatives taking place in this regard.
Thank you for mentioning the education sector, because it's a huge incubator of talent, right? Local talent, right? We're always talking about attracting talent, but you've got a large number of local talent that is being developed and educated at top universities, right? With professors visiting from abroad, basically, but also locals sharing their expertise and sharing their experiences.
And I'm going to chip in here. I went this weekend to a hackathon with it was the first health tech hackathon at ITCAN Center. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. And you've got young, fantastic minds. And I thought they were just young students, but there were some students, but there was actually doctors and medical experts and everyone wanting to try to learn this entrepreneurship and how to take those next steps. So this is something that I urge everybody to tap into, because the youngsters of today have got that bright mind and they've also got that desire. And they don't know any fear. So all they're doing is driving towards that educational side of it, which can help any SME or startup that's out there.
I think this is extremely important that you mentioned ITCAN, right? Again, a purpose-built facility, world-class, state-of-the-art, right? And I think we've got an abundance of this infrastructure in country, right? And sometimes may not appreciate, right, to which extent we can utilize it, right? And you've got guests from abroad, visitors, right? Businessmen and women that are experiencing it for the first time, that are comparing it with what they are used to in their respective countries. And it's outstanding, right? They leave with lasting impressions and seriously consider doing business here.
And again, I know that we've got lots to cover, but there was another one with the professor that came over from Italy, Turin, and he's been involved in the cure for leukemia, and he's been a leader in this area, and the changes that he's seen go through is quite drastic, where now the cure rate is something like 90%. And he came to Qatar. He's 74 years old. We took him around all the facilities, 70 years old, and he said by far, this was the best he's ever experienced on a global basis. And that's the opportunity sometimes we've got here. All you've got to do is just keep on uncovering. And I suppose that's what we're going to do with our subject matter experts and our partners over this next year, which is exciting. So now we're going to go on to the law part of it, which obviously is your area.
So that takes us, Steve, to the different legal reforms that took place in Qatar to definitely support that vision. And I would maybe start with going back, let's say, to 20 years ago. If you need to set up a business, the process was really hectic. And nowadays, even though you are sitting somewhere on the other side of the world, you can simply register your business by simply, creating an account through the Hukumi website, and then going through the whole process by reserving the trade name, by having your articles of association in place, and then going through the whole company formation. So there were so many changes that took place in the commercial companies law. They eliminated a lot of some bureaucratic steps that nowadays are not really existing, including, for example, in the past you had to have a specific capital, 200,000 Qatari riyals. That's now is eliminated. You can set up the business. You don't need even to prove that you've deposited the capital on a bank account. So again, going through the KYC requirements of banks, that can take place at a later stage. So you can first set up the whole company, and then after that you can deal with banks, open the bank account, do the capital deposit, and going through the other processes. There is also several changes that took place in employment law and labor law. So we've been seeing elimination of requirements. Now it is more flexible for the employees to move from one company to another company to a different sector without any issues. Definitely there are some certain competition regulations that are in place, but these are again limited for a specific time duration, so it shouldn't be really an issue. In the past, we used to see if I need to leave the country, I need an exit permit from my sponsor, which is the company that I'm working for. This is no longer a requirement. We've also seen it changes. Definitely, I would say the most important one is the foreign investment law, where in the past, every time as a foreign investor, you need to open a business, you have to have a Qatari national. Now, it is no longer the case in most of the sectors. except of like, I would say 2 or 3 sectors where you will need to have a Qatari nationals, but then most of the other sectors, as a foreign investor, you have definitely the opportunity to set up your own business without the need of a Qatari partner. Although I would say from my own personal experience, it's always good to, if you have the chance to cooperate and partner with Qatari nationals, it's definitely an additional.
I had an experience again the weekend where I saw one expat join up with the right Qatari partner, and they've gone from talking to just 2 people in a coffee morning to help them with logistics to now having 7 operations that are helping, that they've got ripples with them of about 70,000 plus people that they've helped along the way. And that was just being able to have the right Qatari partner to help them drive that business grow. So there is those opportunities, and I agree fully with you.
Very true. And then later on, we will be also covering the nationalization, which is definitely a hot topic now. But again, I see it on the positive side. We will cover it at a later stage.
Perfect. Now, what we'll do, so is there any other legal points you want to?
There are others that are also, I think, very important, including the IP rights. So we've seen a lot of changes to protect patent rights, to protect trademarks, registrations, and the like. Qatar has joined so many conventions, and which again is definitely a very good instrument when people want to think of doing business in Qatar and they want to protect their own brand, their own trademark. So this is definitely a very good initiative.
And they've got to take these things into consideration. Are there other points that you've seen businesses taking steps towards this side of things?
So we've seen a lot of also changes in which is, again, I would say complementary to what we've mentioned, where now it is very easy for businesses to set up where they have the full protection they were looking for.
Okay, so we're going to move on to nationalization and compliance.
Yeah, so in compliance, it's not only important for today for me, if I want to set up my business, it's great, it's a very good step, but then I will need to also think of what compliance matters I need to take in place. It's not only that's related to protecting the government rights, but also to protect my own rights as a partner, as a shareholder in a company. So initiatives from having right accounts, right like bookkeeping, and also having general assemblies, that will definitely lead to, if we have today a company that has been set up between several shareholders, then it's also a protection for them for later on, that everyone will know what are the rights for each shareholder. So from, again, having general assemblies in place, having today books and accounts filed at the different authorities, whether it is the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, whether it is the general tax authorities, and definitely having an auditors, which is a requirement for each company, for each entity to have in place. So it's not only for companies, that covers also the foundations, that also cover the associations and different kind of legal entities.
I think on this subject, and I just want to tap on it so that everybody realizes, and there's going to be a lot of people out there that are doing this all okay at the moment. But sometimes we've got a tendency, because we're operators in small and medium-sized enterprises, that we become busy fools. We're great operators, but we don't take care of those compliance sides. And we just don't realize how much value that's going to bring to our company. And it's not just from making sure that you're on the right road and the right track. It means that your company is valued, because if somebody wanted to come in and invest in your company, all these things, at a moment's notice, you need to be able to show them what standard your company's up to.
Exactly, yes, you're right, Steve. So including the legal due diligence and the financial due diligence. Today, if you want to invite an investor to join your company, then again you have to show, as you've mentioned, the books and all the records that you have for the several years. So this is definitely very important.
Yeah.
And I think there are just adding on what you've just said, I think there are 2 aspects to it, right? There are these annual time-driven filings that are required to be submitted regardless of whether you generate business and you're active or not, right? And there are these event-driven filings, right? Ad hoc filings in case there are changes in a structure. When it comes to a change in shareholders, when it comes to a change in directors or in secretary or in authorized signatory, for example, right? That have to be announced. Sometimes even just a change in shareholder particulars, an address change change, for example, right? A personal document change. All of these changes would have to be reported as well, and it's too easy to forget sometimes, right? To make the relevant filings, and you would then find out later that you have not filed on time and may be subjected to financial or non-financial penalties when they are so easy to avoid, as long as you're on top of it, right, at the time.
Yeah, and again, I'm going back to my own experiences. These type of things that we're bringing up now is where we've learned by our own mistakes. So, and we want to tell you, to share with you, that you don't make those same mistakes that me made. Okay, we've got it sus now, but it's been a time that you've got to focus on this, because if you don't, it doesn't bring any value. And it will catch you out.
And maybe a last comment, sorry, before we jump on the next topic. Be aware which jurisdiction you fall under, right? Because the reporting requirements are different when it comes to the Ministry of Commerce, when it comes to the Qatar Financial Center, when it comes to the Qatar Free Zones Authority, or Qatar Science and Technology Park. So just make sure that you are aware, or ask your respective regulator on what needs to be done, right? Apart from the audit report, apart from the tax filing, I would also mention the ultimate beneficial ownership information,
yes,
right, which is now required to be disclosed when you renew your commercial registration under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, for example. We are used to it under the QFC and the QFZA, but it's a more recent addition in the MOCI.
And I will say at this stage, okay, there's a lot of information that we're talking about today, and it's all going to be online. We're going to make it accessible to everybody through the DHL initiative page. So everything's going to be there, okay, and you can read upon this, and it's really important information that you can grasp. And if you still haven't grasped it from that information, you can drop us a line, you can send an email, and you will get the answer for it. Okay, so where do we go from now, gents? Which subjects do you want to talk about now?
Felix mentioned the several jurisdictions in Qatar. Basically, again, several years ago, the only jurisdiction was the mainland, which is the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. The name has been changing several times, but it's definitely the mainland. But adding to that, then we had several also, I don't want to call them free zones, but some sort of a free zone. So the Qatar Science and Technology Park, it's more of a technology hub. And then there is the Qatar Financial Center that took place again several years ago. Adding to that, there is the Media City, and then the hot one is definitely recently is the free zones, and having different free zones established in place, including the port free zone and the airport free zone.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting stuff, and nothing's standing still here. It just keeps on moving, and at such a pace.
True. Maybe we can briefly talk about some of the key differentiators between these jurisdictions,
please,
right? Because the Ministry of Commerce and Industry is very specific. We come from a place where it was required mandatorily to have a local partner involved, right? Fast forward to where it is no longer required, and it's at the investor's discretion to decide whether or not to partner with someone, for example, depending on the business activities, depending on the customer segments, the target markets, the ownership structure, right? Which are all important factors to not only decide whether or not to partner, but also which jurisdiction to go for, right? Because on the highest level, it's probably coming down to looking at what you intend to do, which kind of business you intend to run, in order to decide for one or the other licensing platforms, right? Where the Ministry of Commerce is probably covering most business activities that are permitted in Qatar. The Qatar Financial Center is probably more focused on on financial services, right? Offering solutions for holding companies, for special purpose companies, for investment clubs, for different fund structures, right? The Qatar Free Zones Authority, again, having identified a number of key sectors, but I would say most importantly, requiring part of the business to be generated outside of Qatar, right? So that free zone businesses are not competing with mainland companies and benefiting from unfair advantages. You've got Science and Technology Park, which requires a strong focus on research, development and innovation, right, in order to become eligible. And like you said, Ahmed, most recently Media City, which is focused on media-related businesses, right? And again, having characteristics that are similar to a free zone, but not being a free zone per se, right? Offering tax breaks, offering full foreign ownership, offering access to purpose-built infrastructure for media-related activities, right? And being home to more than 30 companies as we speak, there being additional companies added to it, right? And media being a very important sector and a growing sector in Qatar, I'm very curious to see where this Media City initiative is going to go.
Very excited with this one, Felix. Very excited. What's the if we can move on to the landscape, the business landscape? Can you both tell us what the opportunities are and what's out there?
Maybe we briefly mention a few other stakeholders, right, that are very important to consider when doing business here, because it's not only about the licensing platforms. There are several other important organizations that can help you run your business and that may make certain incentives available to SMEs, to larger corporations, private clients, as the case may be. I'd start with Invest Qatar, the investment promotion agency, right, which is the umbrella organization and coordinating efforts between various licensing platforms, reaching out to the world basically and trying to share what Qatar offers. There are a number of interesting initiatives under Invest Qatar's umbrella, including the Startup Qatar initiative, right, which is more targeted towards startups. But there are also several initiatives that are relevant for small and medium enterprises and other established organizations. You have then another key stakeholder with Qatar Development Bank, right, which is mandated to support SMEs in their development and growth financially, but also non-financially. There are several programs, right, that are being conducted in collaboration with private sector participants, subject matter experts in their domain, to support with advice, to support with accounting, with auditing, and with other important matters, right? So QDB is definitely one of the stakeholders to highlight. And then, like Ahmed mentioned earlier, various incubators and accelerators that are again sector specific, right, including the Qatar Business Incubation Center, which is a subsidiary of Qatar Development Bank, the Digital Incubation Center, which is focusing on digital businesses and attached to the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology. Qatar FinTech Hub, which is a collaboration between Qatar Development Bank, Qatar Financial Center. The central bank is being involved basically. So you see FinTech strategy translating into the emergence of an accelerator and incubator, which is then helping create and develop further the local ecosystem, right? You've got Qatar Sports Tech for sports-related businesses. You've got Scale 7 in M7, where we are sitting today, which is focused on the creative industry, fashion, design, basically, and the creative community at large. And QIC Digital Venture Partners, which is more so focused on InsurTech, and related initiatives, right? So all in all, again, sector-specific initiatives in line with these policies and strategies that have been developed, all of which we, the residents, visitors, guests, businessmen and women from abroad can benefit from. So familiarize yourself, have a look at these initiatives and these opportunities and possibilities and leverage them to your business's benefit.
And I suppose it's covering those jurisdictions that we spoke about, which is really important. And we've basically obviously there's industrial hubs too. What are we looking at there?
Exactly. I think it's worth mentioning that Qatar, appears to have one center, which is Doha, in and around Doha. Mm-hmm. But there are obviously other areas that are extremely important and relevant when considering to do business here. You've got free zones, like Ahmed mentioned earlier, an airport free zone, Ras Bufontas, a seaport free zone, which is adjacent to the seaport, Hamad Port, called Al Hul free zone, offering facilities for industrial businesses, for manufacturing, for logistics, and for businesses that are intending or relying on import and export via sea transport, right? But apart from the free zones, you've got industrial hubs, industrial zones, which have existed for a long time, and which have been upgraded in terms of infrastructure, and host manufacturing businesses across sectors basically today. And you've got a number of logistics hubs and parks basically across the country, which are again providing facilities, pre-built warehouses, direct access basically, and strategic location or strategically located in hubs within the country, right? So it's a matter of identifying, I guess, the ideal location, depending on the business activities, depending on the growth plans, basically, depending on the areas that you intend to cover. But what I'm trying to say is there are several options. It's not just Doha, it's not just the outskirts of Doha, but there are opportunities across the country, in the north with Ras Laffan, very prominent, but also in the south with Mesaieed, right, which is a large industrial hub, so to say.
There's so many different opportunities, and it brings us to our last part, is the benefits. Now we can get excited. Now we can share that news. Ahmed, what are the benefits? And let's go touch on some of that experience that you've got. You've seen a lot of changes. Okay, what are those benefits in exciting areas that you see right now?
Thank you, Steve. I think it's definitely an important matter to speak about part of those benefits that, I would say locals or foreign investors would definitely benefit from when entering the Qatar market. The first one for me is definitely the security aspect. So Qatar is one of those most secured countries. So today you can literally leave your home, you can leave your car open, and without really having any issues. In addition to that, Felix mentioned the tax exemptions. Also, when it comes to water and electricity, definitely the cost is relatively low compared to other countries. So all of these initiatives definitely can help any investor to take the step and open their own businesses in Qatar.
We had a company from India come to us once, and they were going to be moving into the free zone. And the phenomenal savings that they were going to make on electricity and water was going to be empowering for them, because the savings that they were going to make was quite considerable. So again, it's good that you picked up on those points, because they are huge benefits. Sometimes we overestimate.
That's very true. I would also add, recently the Ministry of Commerce and Industry also has taken a very good step, having setting up fees, the annual licenses, renewal fees. All of this has been discounted almost to around 80% or 50% of the normal fees. So again, that supports a lot of companies that are in place, or companies that would think of opening businesses in Qatar.
And also rental, right? There were some rules changes for the warehouse rentals, where that went down by 90% in some cases.
Yeah.
Those are phenomenal changes. And I always say standing still is moving backwards. And that's what I'll always say about Qatar. It is never standing still. It's always looking at ways that they can improve.
And evolving on an ongoing basis, right? I mean, I would add to the security aspect also the stability factor, right? Not only from a social perspective or a political perspective, but also from an economical and financial perspective, right? Which is extremely important. So it may be a little more difficult to get into the market, right? To become fully established. It's complicated, it's time consuming, it may be more costly basically than in other markets. But once you're in, it's a very stable environment to operate in. And there are not many boundaries, right? Also, when you look at access to finance, when you look at the access to the international financial system, right? Qatar being home to some of the largest banks in the region, basically, and allowing for foreign remittances to countless countries around the world, the repatriation of profits, for example, without limitations, right? And so on and so forth. I'd also highlight on the tax front the fact that Qatar has signed double taxation agreements with more than 80 countries, right? Which is an area where the country is standing out in comparison to neighboring countries. Even the UAE or Saudi Arabia don't have this number of double taxation agreements adopted.
Plus, you don't also have the personal income tax,
correct,
which is very important.
There's so many advantages here in Qatar that we just don't see, right? We take it for granted. We're not listening, as my saying, we're not listening to the birds sing, the beautiful things that are happening. And when you look at our clients that we're talking to on a regular basis, the quality of life is just that first decision why they're coming here. And we underestimate all these benefits that we're talking about, where we can get excited and where other people should be getting excited about those different areas. It's like, and I just want to go on with this. Let's talk about the QFC, because I know that they've done some some remarkable work, and they're leading the way in so many different areas. And there's so many, as you said, there's so many benefits with them, Felix.
Yeah.
Can you name a few?
Absolutely. Well, I think in the QFC, it's worth mentioning the fact that the legal framework is based on English law, right, rather than Qatari law. International best practices that have been adopted, right, independent judicial system, right, that makes up part of the Qatar Financial Center, with the Qatar International Dispute Resolution Center, for example, being part of it, right, and companies being able to refer to it for the resolution of disputes, but also the employment regulations, for example, that are distinct from Qatar labor law, right? The fact that, for example, WPS does not apply, right?
Labor quotas do not apply also.
Correct. Very important. Immigration-related matters being handled by the Qatar Financial Center, right? So, in essence, you're not dealing with several stakeholders on the mainland. You're not dealing with a Ministry of Commerce, a Ministry of Municipality, a Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Labor, and General Tax Authority, but you're solely relying on one stakeholder, which is the Qatar Financial Center, obviously made up of different departments, but you've got a point of contact you can communicate with, and who responds to any sort of queries, concerns, doubts, questions on an ongoing basis. And I think that's extremely important for foreign investors that are coming to the country, that are coming to a country that is probably very different to where they come from, that are not accustomed to local laws, to customs, traditions, and the way business is done here, right? So having this level of support is extremely important, and I think it's particularly the QFC that is offering it to its investors, right?
They've come such a long way over the years, and it wasn't an easy task that they took on, but they really are exemplary in the way that they're trying to push forward. But it would be unfair to talk about the other ones too, just briefly, on some of the benefits you've got there, which is the free zone. And as we said, logistically, Qatar is in that area where I can't remember the exact numbers, I should have, but where you're in an 8-hour flight that you could be dealing with right now.
I believe it's 6 billion people, right?
6 billion people.
Yeah, it's a large part of the world, right, that you can access from the free zones, right? I think it's extremely vital and interesting to consider that the way the free zones have been developed, right, enables them to provide one single customs free zone, right? So you're exempted, for example, from import and export, re-export duties, right? When importing into the free zone and exporting or re-exporting from the free zone into third countries. And that also applies if you're transferring goods from the airport free zone to the seaport free zone or vis-a-vis, right? Yeah. Which is one key benefit.
And it's something that we've got to tell our clients on a regular basis. You've just got to be doing 70-80% of your business outside of Qatar, so it's not competing with that local market that you're going for, which is important because there are some real big advantages for the QFC, but QFZA. But you've got to make sure the right you fit. Otherwise, you're not going to get past that initial approval.
That's very true. And going, Steve, to the mainland, also the ministry. So it's not only really about. We've mentioned historically the foreign investment law was definitely an issue having a Qatari national, which is not really the case now when it comes to the mainland, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. But I think the big differentiation is when it comes to, let's say, construction companies, when it comes to trading activities, this is where then QFC will not be really the right place. It could be either the free zone or the mainland. So this is, again, I think, a factor for anyone who wants to do business in Qatar to take in place.
I was saving the Ministry of Commerce till last because the transformation they've gone through is quite staggering. And it just doesn't stop there. They're just improving on a constant basis. And they're realizing what the kind of areas that they need to improve on, which they are. But if you can, the hardest thing to do in business is grow, right? So that's just from a small business to a medium-sized business to, and so on. But just imagine what you've got to do from a country perspective and a ministry perspective and all those changes and repercussions. One action has always got a reaction. But what they're doing is transforming the whole scope of things for the best.
So looking back to the ministry, it's not really only the ministry. I would say all now the government bodies, including the QFC, they are all linked to each other. So if I would take one example, 1 week ago, we've managed to do, for the first time, a power of attorney where the person who issued the power of attorney was sitting outside Qatar. We've done it simply online. That was not the case before. So that one can, like companies that are whether in QFC or in the mainland, free zones, they can all benefit from this initiative.
That's incredible. Because if you think what it took you to do those type of things, you're talking months and quite hefty financial implications. So that's remarkable. And again, if you've got any questions on these points, just reach out and we can answer those questions without a shadow of a doubt.
And maybe one last point, just adding to what you said, it works through dialogue, right? Also dialogue with the government. Sometimes we are frustrated, right, with in dealing with regulators and in dealing with complicated procedures and processes, basically. But it's also a matter of providing feedback, of reaching out, right? We've been part of several roundtable discussions, right? Correct. And engagement with government in order to improve these processes. And I think this is one of the big changes, right? The involvement of private sector, right? And the encouragement to actively participate in this change process. And this is also a responsibility on us as operators of privately owned businesses.
And that's where DHL for SMEs come, right? It was kind of, we looked at it with DHL. Thank you so much indeed, DHL, because you were the one that took this initiative on. And you were incredible with doing this. And the way that we see, I look at firms like yourself, and you've just saw Felix in action, okay? And you see that information that you're going to gain over this next year is going to be quite considerable. And it will, if you listen, if you go and do that market research, if you go and learn on these things, I'm telling you, there could be transforming things in your business, not just to just grow in Qatar, but grow on a global basis. You just heard Tamimi, where they're operating. Look at where DHL is operating. It's just, you will not believe the kind of information that you're going to get over this next year. And you two gents have been wonderful today. It's been a wonderful discussion with you. I've really enjoyed it. It's left for me to obviously thank everybody, all of our partners, and we can see them there, and I'll read them out. DHL, thank you, DHL. Felix with Soutien, and obviously myself. We love being part of this. Tamimi, Commercial Bank, Microsoft, Ogilvy, Sabre Insurance, Vodafone, and Workington. Thank you for helping us do this for you guys that is going to learn so much. I hope you've enjoyed today. I hope you've enjoyed that journey with us. It's the first one from our side, but let me tell you, it's just the beginning. And if you think this is good, it's only going to get better from here. So until next time, until our next event, thank you so much for listening, and thank you for being part of this wonderful initiative.